Please subscribe my channel. James had always considered himself a patient man, someone who could see the world clearly and not get swept away by emotions. His life had been steady, predictable, a rhythm he cherished. His marriage with Eliza, lasting over 6 years, had felt like a quiet stability he could rely on. They had their ups and downs, of course, little spats over trivial matters, what restaurant to go to, whose turn it was to wash dishes, but nothing that shook the foundation of what they had built. At least that was his belief. But that evening, everything shifted in a way James hadn't anticipated. The night had started like any other, with Eliza talking about her day at work, her laughter filling the room. But there was a subtle difference this time. A flicker in her eyes, a hesitation in her tone, a small distance in her warmth. James noticed it, but he tried to convince himself it was nothing. People get tired, stressed, preoccupied with work, he reasoned. He didn't notice the phone first. That small device, usually left casually on the counter, had started disappearing into her purse, her bag, sometimes even into her coat pocket when she moved around the house. At first, James thought it was a new habit, something trivial. But when Eliza started taking calls in private, stepping out of the room, and suddenly laughing at messages he couldn't see, a quiet tension began to grow inside him. The breaking point came at a dinner party. They had been invited to a close friend's celebration downtown, a lavish event with everyone dressed in their finest. Eliza looked radiant as always, her dress a deep navy that complemented her hair and eyes. James smiled at her, trying to ignore the unease crawling in his chest. But as the night progressed, he couldn't. He saw it. A man, tall and confident, moving close to Eliza with the kind of familiarity that shouldn't exist between a wife and a stranger. The way she leaned in, the ease with which they spoke, their hands brushing casually, it was unmistakable. James felt a cold shock run through him, but outwardly he stayed calm, forcing himself to observe rather than react. He had always believed in proof before accusation, in clarity before confrontation. But clarity hit him now with the weight of a hammer. The man's name was Derek, a colleague from Eliza's work, someone she had mentioned only sparingly, never inviting him into their personal conversations. And yet here he was, close to her in a way that made James's stomach churn. He watched as they exchanged smiles, small touches, whispers he couldn't hear but instinctively knew were intimate. James stepped away, moving to the corner of the room, keeping his hands in his pockets. His mind raced through the past few weeks, the late nights, the sudden private calls, the laughter that didn't reach him. Every small detail now made sense in a terrifying way. He realized he had been living in a bubble of assumption, choosing comfort over suspicion, denying what his instincts had been warning him about. The rest of the evening became a blur of controlled observation. He didn't speak to Eliza about what he had seen. He didn't confront Derek. Instead, he allowed himself to quietly step back from the life he had known, a life that suddenly felt fragile, easily dismantled. He made a choice that would define the rest of the week. He would walk away. Not angrily, not with a confrontation that could be twisted into blame or chaos, but with deliberate, calm detachment. He needed to see how far this went, to understand without the distortions of an immediate emotional reaction. When they returned home, James didn't follow Eliza into the usual post-party routine of laughter, snacks, and casual conversation. He went straight to his study, sat down at the desk, and let the silence envelop him. He thought about the years they had shared, the plans they had made, the promises they had whispered late at night. All of it felt suspended, like a painting frozen in the air, beautiful yet unreachable. Eliza noticed immediately. She tried to initiate small talk, a question about the music at the party, a comment on the dessert she had loved, but James's responses were brief, clipped. He wasn't rude, he wasn't explosive, he was detached, calculating. The calmness in his voice carried a subtle weight, a signal that something had shifted fundamentally between them. The next day he took a walk downtown, through streets familiar yet suddenly foreign. He didn't call, didn't message, didn't make a move. He observed, letting the distance build. It was not a punishment, it was a necessity. He needed to see whether Eliza would act, whether she valued the relationship enough to bridge the gap she had created, or whether her actions at the party were part of a pattern he could no longer ignore. By the third day, Eliza's attempts to reach him had increased. Messages, calls, small notes left on the kitchen counter. "James, can we talk? I want to explain. Please don't walk away." Each one hit him with the weight of reality. She was trying, yes, but the attempt lacked the credibility of action. The observation of the party, the intimate gestures he had witnessed, could not be erased by words alone. Actions would need to match the apology, or the distance would remain. Finally, on the fourth evening, she appeared at his apartment. Her expression carried the fatigue of sleepless nights, her eyes red and raw. She tried to speak, to bridge the silence, to explain. But James did not allow her immediate access to his presence. He listened, nodding occasionally, letting her words roll over him without immediate engagement. He wanted her to see the gravity of her choices, to understand the silent weight of his observation. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to hurt you." James's eyes remained steady on her, not angry, not pleading, simply aware. He asked nothing, demanded nothing. The clarity he had gained over the past days allowed him to see her as she was, flawed, impulsive and human, but not trustworthy in that moment. The story of betrayal, he realized, was not merely about infidelity. It was about transparency, respect, and consistency. It was about the quiet accumulation of choices that led to undeniable truth. And so he chose to walk away deliberately, not recklessly, not without thought. The act itself was simple in motion but monumental in consequence. He left the apartment that night, a measured distance between him and the woman he had loved, carrying with him a silent acknowledgement. Life had shifted, and only time would tell whether rebuilding was possible, or whether some fractures were simply permanent. The night air was crisp as he walked through the city, each step deliberate, each thought weighed. He felt a strange mix of emptiness and clarity, a void that was uncomfortable yet necessary. He was free from immediate betrayal, yet bound to the reality of what had occurred. The walking became a meditation, a methodical process of untangling emotion from observation, instinct from proof. He knew deep down that the story was far from over. Eliza would act, would respond, would try to bridge the gap. But he had set the terms now. No immediate forgiveness, no blind trust, no rushed conclusions. Any future interaction would need to respect the gravity of what had already occurred. And in that knowledge he felt the first glimmer of a strange liberation, the power of control regained, even in a world that had shifted violently beneath his feet.